Hello and welcome back, Sunshine Fam. Yes, you see the title correctly. I am starting up my presidential highlights videos yet again. It has been forever, probably over a year since I recorded the George W. Bush presidential highlights video, but because I have a new camera that I know will not shut off after 19 minutes, I just decided to make it one long video. So welcome back to presidential highlights. I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to get a new one out to you, but it is what it is, and here it is. So today we are talking about the 43rd President of the United States. And for those of you that are new, sorry, I'm a little bit off on this. For those of you that are new, my name is Chloe. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for finding me. I urge you to go back, if you haven't already seen all the other presidential highlights videos I've done. I started with George Washington, and we are now up to George Bush Jr., the son. And I talk about the key events that happened during their time in office. The only time I ever talk about their death is if they happened to die while they were in office, like Kennedy or FDR. And that one president, I don't remember who it was, but he only served literally for 1 month, and then it went to his vice president. So, in any case, today we're talking about George W. Bush. This is George W. Bush. He was the son of our 41st president, George H.W. Bush. And a lot happened during his presidency. And I will have some newspapers to show you this time as well. So let's get into this, shall we? So George W. Bush served from 2001 through 2009, and his vice president was Dan Quayle. So going back just a little bit, in the year 2000, November 7th, there was a contested election. Now, this was kind of a history-making moment. There was a recount needed due to close calls in several states, especially Florida, which had to do with what they call ballot chads. And I don't know if they still do it this way, but probably not since this happened. But in the state of Florida, at least in the state of Florida, I don't know if other states did it this way, but Florida was the big one back then. When they voted, they didn't have a pen that you would like check mark or draw a line across, connecting the arrow like we do here in Minnesota. They would have like a stylus with like a pinpoint thing on it that you would punch a hole into whichever candidate you want to be elected. And the little pieces of paper, if they didn't fall straight through, were called a chad. And so there was a lot of that going on, especially in Florida. So they had to do a recount to find out who actually won the election. December 12th, the Supreme Court halts the recount, ruling 5-4. The court stops the recount in many Florida counties. Al Gore was Bush's running mate, and he announced that Bush won the presidency. So in 2001, January 20th, Bush was inaugurated. It was the second time the son of a former president sat as president. The first time was John Quincy Adams in 1825. And he was the son, I think he was the son of John Adams, I want to say that. You'll have to go back to John Quincy Adams to find out which one it was. I'm not going to go digging through my notebook full of notes. January 22nd, Bush bans the abortion aid. He bans aid to international groups performing or counseling on abortion. Reagan initiated it, but it didn't continue with Clinton. It did not continue with Clinton. January 29th, deregulating religious charities. He created the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. It eases the regulation on religious charities to aid the poor and the disadvantaged. in Minnesota. One of those charities would be Sharing and Caring Hands, which I am very passionate about. It's Mary Jo Copeland runs it, and it's to take care of the homeless in Minneapolis anyway. February 16th, attacking Iraq. It was to enforce a no-fly zone, and it was called a routine mission. Now, if you remember, I think it was my last Presidential Islands video. It was so long ago, I don't remember. No, it would have been before that. It was in the night when whoever was president in 91. I guess I could look that up. We were at war with Iraq. That was the Gulf War in 91. So that would have been George Sr. that was in during that time. Now, there was a lot of people that were thinking that the Bushes were totally against the Middle East and all that stuff, and that they were the ones that actually caused the Iraqi war, but it really was not. I will get into that in another video if you so choose. Leave your comments below if you would like to hear that story about the Gulf War and all that I know about it in my research. March 29th, the Kyoto Protocol was rejected. It abandoned the initial treaty, or international treaty, signed by 180 countries. It reduces global warming to set limits on industry emissions. April 1st, a spy plane downed over South China Sea. So we've been at war with China for quite some time, as you can see. A U.S. plane was clipped by a Chinese fighter, which was forced to land in China. It strains the relations between China and the U.S. April 4th, journalists review the recount from the election. The Miami Herald and the USA Today reported on the recount. Bush would have won Florida by 1,665 votes. April 25th, Bush backs Taiwan over China. Bush pledges military support for Taiwan in case of an attack from China. June 7th, $1 trillion tax cut. Bush signs a $1.35 trillion tax cut into law. Administration wanted $1.6 trillion. It was a gradual elimination of an estate tax. August 9th, halting stem cell research. I remember this one too. It allows continued research on current stem cells, but it prohibits new stem cells from embryos. And I know that Michael J. Fox, when he first got diagnosed with Parkinson's, he was very much for stem cell research, and so he talked very much against this. So now we get into what everybody remembers, which is September 11th, 2001, the terrorist attacks. So I have a paper here from the Pioneer Press, which shows Beyond Belief. That's the front page. The back page, now I will tell you the back page is a little bit, I wouldn't say graphic, but there is a picture on the back page that if you don't want to see it, you can look away now and I'll let you know when I put the paper down. So that's the back page. It's the middle picture I'm talking about. I'm not sure if you can actually see that. I don't want to get it too close. But pretty much everybody remembers 9/11. I've got several books on the subject, several videos on the subject. I know more about it than I really should. 4 hijacked planes crashed that day. Now, I recall going online, and there was a website that I found called The Story of the 11s. Ever since then, I have not been able to find that story anywhere, so I'm thinking it was taken down. But it just basically said that every 11 years in Osama bin Laden's life, something major happened, and it just happened to be 2001 that the terrorist attacks happened in New York and Pennsylvania. 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center, 1 in each tower. 1 went into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and 1 was flown into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, because the passengers on the plane got wind of what was happening, and they tried to take over the plane, and they saved countless lives that day. It's really unsure of where that plane was really headed. Some people say it was the Capitol. Some people say it was going to be the White House. The one that went into the Pentagon, what I remember hearing was that the plane actually circled the Capitol, the nation's capital, a few times, but the pilot couldn't find anywhere to fly the plane into, and he looked out his window and saw the Pentagon and decided to fly into the Pentagon. We'll never know what the truth is because all the people on those planes died that day. But that's just one of the stories that I heard. Leave your comments below if you had heard that story or not. September 20th, targeting bin Laden. Tom Ridge was appointed to Homeland Security. That's when Homeland Security first started, was after the terrorist attacks. Bush drives home the war on terrorism, not on Muslims. There was a big thing back then about, we shouldn't trust the Muslims because all Muslims are bad. That's not exactly true. That's like saying all black people are part of a gang, and that's absolutely not true. There's a few bad apples in the bunch, and you can't blame an entire society, race, gender, religion on the acts of a few. You really can't do that, because then you'd be judging me because I'm white, and so I must be racist, but I'm not. Tom Ridge was the governor of Pennsylvania, heads the new Office of Homeland Security, which includes 40 federal agencies. October 7th, Operation Enduring Freedom. From the treaty room, Bush announces military action in Afghanistan has begun. October 17th, anthrax scare in Washington, D.C. Now, you guys may remember that, but that kind of, after the first few months, that story kind of fell by the wayside, so people tend to forget that there was a big anthrax scare. The Capitol was shut down. People in Florida and New York already had it. $1.5 billion to fight bioterrorism. And I remember the first guy that was reported to have died from anthrax worked in an office, and he had reported that he had gotten a letter in the mail. So that's why a lot of the post offices were not delivering mail. A lot of people were afraid that they were going to get anthrax in their mail. I know a few letters went out to Senator Daschle and also to NBC, I want to say Tom Brokaw. It was addressed to Tom Brokaw that had anthrax in it. And big time scare. I don't know if anything was if they ever caught the person that did it. I'd have to research that. So if you want me to do research on the anthrax scare, leave your comments below and I can do another video on that. December 2nd, Enron files for bankruptcy. Remember that one too? It was Chapter 11. It was the largest in American history, the largest bankruptcy in American history. It was Enron was the world's premier energy trading and services firm. Stocks plummeted after the CFO allowed the company to hide $500 million of debt. The Bush administration has ties with the CEO, Kenneth Lay, and other executives, but denies any involvement. December 13th, withdraw from anti-ballistic missile treaty. Bush notifies Russia of intentions from the 1972 treaty. Bush and Vladimir Putin, again, we're talking about him way back when, they failed to agree. So in June of 2002, the U.S. officially withdraws and allows to conduct tests. 2002, January 8th, No Child Left Behind. It was an education reform requiring standardized math and reading tests. There was a reauthorization of the Johnson era Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. That was on April 11th. I went back through my notes and looked that up. January 29th, the State of the Union. The war against terror was only just beginning. Bush cites that North Korea, Iran, and Iraq as an axis of evil. We haven't really heard much about North Korea lately. I'm sure they'll be in the news pretty soon. March 22nd, the Israeli-Palestinian relations. Bush asks the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat to stop attacking Israel. Dick Cheney, refuses to meet with Arafat while in the Middle East. March 29th, Israeli troops take over most of Arafat's headquarters. That same day, Colin Powell travels to the Middle East. He was the Secretary of State, and he holds talks with Israel and Arafat. May 12th, Jimmy Carter travels to Cuba. It's been a while since I've read these notes. Jimmy Carter travels to Cuba and visits Fidel Castro. It was the first trip by an American president in 40 years. May 20th, Bush states over 40-year-old Cuba trade embargo will continue until the free and fair elections are met. May 16th, searching for signs of 9/11. Congress insists the administration had info that 9/11 could have been prevented. It was believed there were signs of the plot. Now, I'm going to refer to a movie that you can see on YouTube called Path to 9/11. I believe that is the most accurate depiction of what led up to the terrorist attacks on September 11th of 2001 rather. Because if you remember, back in 93, there was another terrorist attack on the World Trade Center by a guy named Ramzi Youssef that yours and my taxes, if you live in the U.S., are going to keep him in a high security federal prison in Colorado. So he's still alive. Ramzi Youssef is still alive. May 24th, and he was actually the mastermind. He and his uncle were the mastermind, according to this movie. They were the masterminds of 9/11, and they called it the Plains Operation. May 24th, Bush and Putin nuclear treaty. It was signed at the Kremlin to reduce nuclear arsenals by 2/3 over the next 10 years. So this was actually, I actually wrote this wrong, but this was actually in 2002. So this would have actually been 20 years. But Putin, I wrote a note in here, Putin invaded the Ukraine on February 24th of 2022. So that's interesting. On that, excuse me, on that same day, Bush expands Homeland Security. It will now coordinate and oversee over 100 organizations. The FBI and the CIA were criticized for failing to prevent 9/11. They couldn't get on the same page. Again, back to Path to 9/11. June 24th, Bush calls for a new Palestinian leadership. He asks the people to remove Arafat, who had served more than 30 years. I can't talk today, sorry. And he said, quote, when this happens, the U.S. will support a Palestinian state. July 8th, curbing corporate abuses. After Enron and WorldCom, both companies inflated claims of profits. The Dow Jones dropped below 9,000. It was the first time since 9/11. September 4th, action against Iraq. Saddam Hussein, remember him, was called a serious threat by Bush. The House Majority Leader Whip Tom Delaney, Republican from Texas, says Iraq military action is inevitable. September 12th, Bush addresses the UN Security Council. Bush asks for military action in Iraq. Colin Powell states the same. France, Germany, and Russia express severe reservations. The U.S. will act alone if the UN won't help. UN would be the United Nations, for those of you that don't know. October 10th, Congress authorizes force against Iraq. The Senate vote of 77 to 23 authorizes force against Iraq. Now, let's keep in mind, Iraq had nothing at all to do with 9/11. Two totally separate things. For those of you that think that we went after Iraq because we felt that they were part of 9/11, it was not. The only thing that may be considered somewhat similar to 9/11 is that Iraq could have been used as a refuge for Osama bin Laden and his followers. But otherwise, Iraq is totally separate from 9/11 and Osama bin Laden. The House votes 296 to 133 in favor of force against Iraq. November 5th, the Republicans gained seats in the Senate, in the Senate they maintain in the House. Okay, so wait a minute. Let me reread that again. So the Republicans gain seats in the Senate, but they are maintained in the House. So now it's mostly a Republican Congress, I guess. Congress and senators. I don't quite understand all the politics, even though I'm sitting here talking about it. December 20th, arms inspection in Iraq. The UN reports that Iraq remains in violation. So that's really what the Iraq War was all about. It was in violation of Security Council Resolution 1441. It was unanimously adopted on November 8th, and it gives Hussein a final opportunity to comply with disarmament. So let me explain to those of you that don't know. When we went over to Iraq for peacekeeping purposes, I think it was, we found that they had weapons of mass destruction, which was against the UN peace treaty. Well, that was prior to us going over there. When we went over there, all of a sudden there were no weapons to be found. So everybody's like, well, then why did we attack Iraq if they didn't have any weapons? Think about this. It was a proven fact that Hussein had an underground bunker underneath the desert. And it was, I even remember seeing on the news the Iraqis filming themselves bringing these weapons of mass destruction through the streets of, what's the main city in Iraq? Oh my gosh, I can't remember the main city. I'm sure you guys are all yelling at me right now what the main city of Iraq was. And I might think about it before I end this video. But anyway, the main city, Baghdad. And when we went over and we didn't find those weapons of mass destruction, we weren't able to get underground. So that's probably where they had them hidden because they knew we were coming. So just because we didn't find them doesn't mean they didn't have them. Think about that. So again, nothing to do with 9/11. Where was I? Okay, so now we jump to 2003. Sorry, I kind of lost my place. January 7th, further tax cuts. It reveals a plan to cut taxes by $674 billion over 10 years. So that would have been 2013. It suggests it will stimulate the economy, end recession, and create jobs. The Democrats say it's financially irresponsible and favors the rich. February 1st, the Columbia shuttle explosion. I don't think I have any papers on that. I didn't look far enough in my papers, and I don't have that written down on here, so I probably don't have a paper about that. But Columbia, not Challenger, but Columbia, the second space shuttle. The shuttle comes apart during re-entry, and all 7 crew members die. The debris falls in Texas and Louisiana. Now, there is also on YouTube here a video from inside the shuttle when they were making their re-entry. And it shows it all the way through to when the flames were coming off the top of the front of the space shuttle, all the way till just before the shuttle broke apart. So I think after that, the space program kind of started, they started looking at NASA and saying, should we even continue these missions with these old vehicles or not? And I know nowadays they're starting to they're starting to talk about restarting the space program, but that'll come later on in another presidential highlights video. February 12th, North Korea's nuclear capabilities. The CIA director, George Tenet, says North Korea has ballistic missiles that can hit the U.S. And we all know, we've all seen what has happened with that lately in the last few years. March 16th, taking military action in Iraq. After debating for months, U.S. Security Council and Bush states the U.S. intend to wage war with Iraq. The leaders Saddam Hussein and sons have 48 hours to leave. Let me just look at this paper and see when this was. Okay, 27. Okay, so the other paper I have, I don't think I have it in my presidential highlights video or my key events that happened, but it's something that happened here in Minnesota that I wanted to bring up. So I'll try to keep an eye on that. Okay, 48 hours to leave. Okay, March 19th, Bush declares war with Iraq. Because Hussein didn't leave, Bush announces war at 10:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Why? Due to weapons of mass destruction, which I already told you about, and the brutal repression of its civilians. 9/11 had nothing to do with this, which I already talked about. Okay, March 25th, tax cuts reduced to fund the war. Senate approves to cut the tax plan to $350 billion, less than half the original plan. Now, I do have a note on the side that I did look up. There have been 10,624 battles in history up to this point, I think. So that's a lot of wars and battles. April 10th, President Bush and Tony Blair appeal to the Iraqi people. Bush and Prime Minister Tony Blair air a broadcast on Iraqi TV stating the people own the people. Oh, I'm trying to read my writing here. TV stating the people live in peace in post-Saddam era. Oh, can live in peace. See, I told you I cannot read my writing. It looks like own, but I can live in peace in post-Saddam era. Sorry about that. May 1st, Bush claims mission accomplished. Standing on the USS Abraham Lincoln, Bush declares the combat operation in Iraq are over. It does link it to the war on terror, and he vows to keep looking for banned weapons. Side note, 8 countries do have WMDs. China, France, India, North Korea, Pakistan, Russia, the US, and the UK. Israel has a few hundred, but falls in line with the nuclear ambiguity. So that kind of has me thinking, why is the US so against other countries having weapons of mass destruction when we ourselves have them? Food for thought. May 22nd, the Iraqi sanctions were lifted. It was imposed since the 91 Gulf War. U.S. and the U.K. has control of Iraq until a legitimate government and authority use of oil revenues for humanitarian aid and reconstruction. May 28th, Bush signs the 3rd largest tax cut in history, $350 billion in an effort to strengthen the economy and reverse trend of unemployment. Congress Democrats claims it favors the wealthy. June 4th, Bush, Sharon, Abbas meet. George Bush, Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, and Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas meet in Aqaba, Jordan, and they discuss the roadmap for peace, which I don't think we're ever going to have until Jesus comes back. June 17th, the federal law enforcement and race. Bush issues guidelines forbidding law enforcement from considering race or ethnicity in routine patrol duties. The exception is matters of national security and counterterrorism. Now, we've seen how that's gone over the last several years, but I think it's more we the people than really the police department. Although there are a few bad apples, we know that, but that won't come until much later, especially here in Minnesota. July 11th, assumed Iraqi nuclear potential discredited. George Tenet takes full responsibility for claiming that Iraq was obtaining uranium from Africa. Shouldn't have been approved by the CIA. July 22nd, U.S. forces kill Hussein's sons, Odeh and Qusay, in Mosul, Iraq. Saddam is nowhere to be found. Interesting how he found, he claimed to be this great leader and, all this. July 24th, the CIA refuses the 9/11 findings. Joint Congressional Committee on Intelligence releases an 800-page document. It concludes that the intelligence failed to respond to alerts, targets, and methods. The NSA, the CIA, and the FBI are included in that. Path to 9/11 movie. Show the book. I'm not going to do that. There is a book that's for the 9/11 Commission, and I don't see it up there. I know I have it. It's just somewhere in my apartment. But I did get that. I never really read that though, because I figured that was based on the Path to 9/11 movie was based on that. September 30th, the Justice Department probes operative leaks. There was a full criminal investigation stating that the Bush administration leaked the name of the covert CIA operative to the media in July. October 7th, weapons inspector finds no nuclear weapons. The chief U.S. weapons inspector, David Kay, says his 1,400-member team found no biochemical or nuclear weapons in Iraq. That's where I was talking about the underground bunker. Apparently I got ahead of myself. They said they had the ability to possess such weapons. October 5th, Bush bans the late-term abortions. It was the first law since the Supreme Court decision in the 1973 Roe v. Wade. December 8th, Medicare overhaul. It includes the first prescription drug benefits beginning in 2006. Creates incentive that private insurance covers Medicare subscription. I'm not sure what I meant by that. Creates the incentive that private insurance covers Medicare maybe subscribers? People that had Medicare? Maybe that's what I meant. Anyway, take it how you will. December 18th, Iran agrees to weapons inspections. It grants unrestricted inspection to the UN IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency. 2004, January 20th, Bush delivers his fourth State of the Union, speaks about foreign policy agenda and stressing issues of national security. March 8th, Iraq creates interim constitution. It provides a framework to establish transitional government. Sorry, I sometimes abbreviate and I say the wrong word. The same day, the Shiite-Sunni confrontations. U.S. forces in Iraq deal with violence between the Shiite Muslims in Baghdad and Sunni Muslims in Fallujah. April 28th, U.S. abuse of Iraqi prisoners. CBS broadcasts abuse of Abu Ghraib prison outside of Baghdad. I think that's when the whole waterboarding thing started, and then also in Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay. May 17th, Missouri approves same-sex marriage. It was the first state to offer this. Bush tells Congress he wants a constitutional amendment banning this. June 3rd, the CIA director, Tenet, resigns due to his part for intelligence failures leading up to 9/11. June 8th, circumventing bans on torture. The Attorney General John Ashcroft answers questions from the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's in regards to the two leaked government memos containing legal arguments regarding the torture of terrorist suspects. Maybe that's when Gitmo started. I don't remember. June 28th, formal occupation of Iraq ends. The coalition of provisional authority ends occupation in Iraq. 130,000 troops remain in Iraq. September 2nd, probably for peacekeeping purposes, Republicans nominate Bush, with Vice President Dick Cheney as the GOP at the GOP convention in New York City. September 30th, first Bush-Kerry debate. Senator John Kerry, doesn't say where it was from, focuses on national security and foreign policy. The main focus was on the Iraq War. October 8th, second Bush-Kerry debate, town hall in St. Louis, Missouri. October 13th, Bush-Kerry in a dead heat. They hold the third and final debate. October 29th, bin Laden addresses America. Qatar-based network Al Jazeera shows pieces of the video. Bin Laden claims responsibility and justifies 9/11. Many feel this was an attempt to influence the election. November 3rd, Bush was reelected. He wins by 51% and 274 electoral votes. Kerry receives 252 electoral votes. Republicans slightly gained seats in the House and the Senate. November 8th, retaking Fallujah. U.S. troops launch an assault to take the city. It was the largest military operation since March of 2003. November 15th, Powell resigns. Rice was appointed. Retired Army General and Secretary of State Colin Powell and the former National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. 2005, January 20th, Bush was inaugurated for his second term. Bush delivers the State of the Union. It was a historic reconstructing of Social Security, which allows workers to use payroll taxes to invest in the stock market. It never gets through the Congress. February 17th, appointing a new intelligence czar. U.S. Ambassador to Iraq John Negroponte, I may be mispronouncing that name, was the director of the National Intelligence. It was a new role due to 9/11. February 20th, Bush takes diplomatic trip to Europe. He meets the French President Jacques Chirac, the German Chancellor, Gerhard Schroeder, and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. It was to smooth relations between the three countries, I think. March 31st, Schiavo medical case. Terry Schiavo from Florida was taken off of life support after suffering brain damage. There was a fight between her parents and her husband. Bush sided with the parents. There was a lot of protests over that. Terry Schiavo, I think that's how you pronounce it, Terry Schiavo. June 5th, Hussein was to be tried over war crimes. Iraqi government says the trial will begin within the next 2 months, and they were seeking the death penalty. June 10th, persuading North Korea to end the nuclear pursuit. South Korea President Roh Hyun, however you pronounce that, meets with Bush. He tries to persuade North Korea to join a six-party talks to end the pursuit. June 21st, human rights in Vietnam. Premier Phan Van Car meets. Okay, Phan Van Car, I think, Khair, meets with the Bush. It was the first time since 1975 that the premier visits the U.S., which I guess is their premier. June 28th, the Senate passes an energy bill. It's the omnibus bill supporting traditional energy industries of oil and natural gas. It provides tax incentives to use alternate energy sources like solar and wind power. Didn't realize that it started way back then. July 26th, Discover launched. That takes off from the Kennedy Space Center. It was another space shuttle to repair the International Space Station. It was the first launch since the Columbia disaster in 2003. August 28th, Hurricane Katrina strikes. It breaches the levee in New Orleans and causes massive flooding and destruction of property. Bush was blamed for slow FEMA response. Side note, New Orleans is actually 8 feet below the sea level. Talk about the video. Okay, so I looked up video about these people that went into, they either lived in Louisiana at the time or they went in after Katrina went through. And they found that they could not even get through the roads because they were so flooded. I think that's what I was going to talk about. I don't remember the name of that video, but you can always look it up, I suppose. Just, I don't even know what you'd name it, but I know like a YouTuber like myself went down there and they found that they couldn't even get to the Superdome because the roads were so flooded. Okay, so September 29th, Roberts was appointed the Chief Justice. John G. Roberts replaces William Rehnquist, who died in office. 2006, January 26th, Alito was appointed to the Supreme Court. Senate Judiciary Committee approves Samuel A. Alito Jr. by a vote of 10-8. Concerns previously to replace Sandra Day O'Connor. Let's see, what day was this? This was in 2007. Okay. March 21st, the remaining in Iraq. Bush admits that by pulling out the rest of the U.S. troops is impossible. Progress is being made for democracy in Iraq. May 3rd, bird flu scare. Several cases were showing up in Central and Southeast Asia. Bush proposes a plan with the World Health Organization, or the WHO. Reorganization of international travel and military assistance to minimize losses and public unrest. Maybe that's what we should have done in 2020. May 4th, Mussolini was convicted. The U.S. District Court in Alexandria, Virginia, sentences Zacharias Moussaoui from Minnesota to life without parole. He was also part of interesting. He was also he was supposed to take part in 9/11. He was the first person to stand trial for the 9/11 connection. He's in the same Colorado prison as Ramzi Youssef, who was responsible for the 93 World Trade Center bombing. June 7th, Senate halts debate on same-sex ban. Senate votes 49-48 to add ban to the amendment. July 19th, Bush vetoes stem cell research. It was a bill to lift constraints on federal funding. House unsuccessfully attempts to override. It was the first veto of the Bush administration. October 26th, Bush approves border fence. Now, not the wall from Trump, but a border fence. It was supposed to be a 700-foot fence to deter illegal immigrants from Mexico to the U.S. I guess people have forgotten about that. I don't know whatever happened with that. I'll have to look into that too. If you want me to do another video of all the things that might be confusing on this one, please leave your comments below and I'll try to do more research. And make sure that you specify which areas you want me to do more research on. Or you can do the research yourself, however. November 7th, the Democrats gained the seats. They gained control in the House and the Senate. December 30th, Saddam Hussein was hanged in Baghdad from conviction of crimes against humanity. Side note, he was found in a hole in a farmer's backyard on December 13th of 2003 in Ad-Dar. I think that's how you pronounce it. Ad-Dar, something like that. Yeah, so this big tough guy that thinks that he runs the world is found in a freaking hole in the backyard of a farmer's field. Really? Guess he was a scaredy cat. 2007, although when he was being hanged, there is actually a video of his hanging that somebody had taken while they were there. It's kind of grainy to prove that it really was Saddam Hussein instead of one of his stunt doubles, as you will. Up until they hanged him, he was still claiming that he was in power in Iraq. I find that ironic. January 2007, January 4th, Pelosi becomes the first woman speaker. Nancy Pelosi was a Democrat from California, or is a Democrat from California. The Democrats control the House and the Senate. What day was this? August. Okay. January 8th, the U.S. attacks Al-Qaeda in Somalia. The Air Force launches an air attack. January 11th, increasing troops in Iraq. Bush states the troop surge was to increase security in Baghdad. February 10th, General David Petraeus takes over. It was a multifunctional forces in Iraq to oversee the surge. March 6th, Scooter Libby was convicted. Vice President Cheney's chief of staff was convicted of perjury and obstruction of justice in the CIA operative Valerie Plame, let's see. Valerie Wilson, I can't think of it. Okay, looks like Plame. I'm not sure what that word is. Sorry, guys. Bush later commutes his sentence. April 16th, Virginia Tech massacre. I actually have a... No, that wasn't from Virginia Tech. Okay, I was thinking I had a newspaper about that I forgot to bring out. I think his name was Singh Hoi Cho, shoots 32 students and then himself. It was the deadliest campus rampage in U.S. history. In his manifesto, he claims he was fed up with being bullied. Think about that. All these school shootings that are going on, I think, are the cause, because I've done a little bit of research on this, I think it was a cause of these kids that are being bullied and just got sick of it, so they take it out on everybody. May 1st, Bush vetoes the troop removal. Congress had passed the bill. June 27th, the Supreme Court was to hear Guantanamo appeals by detainees that hadn't had access to federal courts. I think that was the whole waterboarding thing. July 26th, anti-terrorism bill. Congress passes it. It allows the screening of air and sea cargo, I think. It gives more money to government grants to states with the greatest risk. Okay, there goes the air conditioner. It's like 93 degrees outside right now. September 17th, Gonzalez resigns. Mukasey was appointed Attorney General. Michael Mukasey replaces Alberto Gonzalez. October 9th, Dow Jones all-time high. Closes at 14,164, then declines steeply. November 27th, the Middle East Peace Conference. Hosted in Annapolis, Maryland. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert of Israel and Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. December 19th, increasing auto fuel efficiency. Congress passes it, mandates biofuel production. It passes the House, Senate, and Bush signs off on it. Okay, I missed this thing here. So let's back up just a little bit. So in Minnesota, and it didn't make the key events because it wasn't really that big of a deal, I guess. But on August 1st, I think, because this paper was from August 2nd, I-35W bridge came down over the Mississippi River. Here's what that looked like. So that was here in Minnesota. During all this time, I was living in Rockford, Illinois. And then this is the back page that shows more of the bridge that went down. Since then, they were able to clear all this debris off. according to the paper, it says the bridge was rated structurally deficient in 2005. Several people died. Let's see, how many people died in this? Between 50 and 60 vehicles were on the bridge when it went down shortly after 6 p.m. Legions of rescue workers and volunteers swarmed to the scene and spent hours sifting through the wreckage in a frantic search for survivors. 9 people were confirmed dead, 60 were taken to hospitals, and 20 people were still missing late Wednesday night. Authorities said they expected the death toll to rise. So that was early reports. But since then, they have rebuilt the bridge, and more to code, and it is still being used to this day. So that was in 2007, August of 2007, maybe late July 2007. 2008, January 18th, Bush proposes a stimulus package, $145 billion due to housing crisis and oil prices plummeting. Hundreds of individuals, rebates for families with kids, tax deductions for businesses. Boy, wouldn't it be nice if the oil prices plummeted again? January 31st, the U.S. strike kills al-Libi in Pakistan. He was the top al-Qaeda leader. Abu Laith al-Libi was the trained terror operatives. February 1st, Labor Statistics reports drastic job losses. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports more than 15,000 jobs were lost. It hadn't happened in more than 4 years. February 7th, the Senate passes the stimulus package. $170 billion to Americans, tax rebates of $600 plus, tax breaks to certain businesses. I do remember that too, because I was living in Rockford at the time and I got that money. I'm sure you guys did too if you were of age. February 11th, 6 detainees were charged for 9/11. At Guantanamo Bay, conspiracy, murder, terrorism, and they face the death penalty. March 23rd, roadside bomb ups the U.S. death toll in Iraq. The death toll stands at 4,000. May 9th, the State Department renews controversial defense with Blackwater Worldwide. Blackwater was a defense contractor. Guards killed 17 civilians in 2007. May 22nd, Congress overrides veto, pushes Farm Bill. The House and Senate override Bush. It was a $307 billion bill which provides subsidies to farmers. $10 billion plus funds expand nutritional programs, including food stamps. June 3rd, Democrats nominate Obama. Illinois Senator Barack Hussein Obama. Very interesting name, don't you think? June 5th, the Intelligence Committee finds exaggerated evidence. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, after a 5-year study, said Bush and officials greatly exaggerated weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, because apparently they never found the other ones that were probably hidden under the desert. I believe that to this day. While we admit we successfully toppled Hussein's regime, we didn't have the capacity to rebuild fully functioning new country. September 1st, Iraq military regains control. U.S. forces hand over control to Anbar province. We're almost done here, folks. September 7th, federal takeover of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Remember that? That's when everything started going downhill. The U.S. government puts federal mortgage lenders under control of U.S. Treasury. Fannie Mae was equal to the Federal National Mortgage Association, and Freddie Mac was equal to the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation. The parent it prevents institutions from going under. October 1st, Senate approves the nuclear trade with India. It ends a long-standing ban on trading fuels with India. It can purchase fuel on the market so long as it serves civilian purposes. October 3rd, Bush signs the largest bailout in history. During the financial crisis, a $700 billion plan for failing bank assets. October 30th, GDP drops. The gross domestic product drops by 0.3%. It was the first time in 17 years. October 31st, Petraeus takes over the Central Command. General David Petraeus, head of Central Command, oversees all U.S. military operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, and Iran. November 4th, Barack Obama was elected. He was the first black American to hold office, which I will go into later when I go into his key events, which I have not written out yet. November 25th, the Treasury Federal Reserve agreed to buy the debt. It provides further $800 billion in lending programs and small loans to consumers. December 16th, the interest rates set at 0%. The Federal Reserve lowers the interest rates from 1% to 0.25% to 0%. December 19th, Bush bails out the GM and Chrysler. It issues $17.4 billion to keep them from going bankrupt. 2009, January 20th, Barack Obama was inaugurated. He was the 44th president, and Bush leaves for Dallas, Texas. Now, that's the end of my second notebook. So now I got to work on a third notebook. So now you're all caught up with the 43rd president. So now I've only got 3 more presidents to go, I think. Obama, and then Trump, and now we're coming into a new election between Trump, because now Biden has now stepped out of the race. Today's date is July, what's the date today? July 27th of 2024. And as of now, Trump has already gone through, this is kind of spoiler alert, sorry. Trump has already gone through an attempted assassination. Biden has now stepped out of the race, so now Kamala Harris is now taking his place on the Democratic ballot. So now it's going to be between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris for the elections that happen in November. Interesting race that's going on here. Not sure what's going to happen. The guy that I wanted to vote for has now stepped out of the race, but I plan on voting him, on putting him on the ballot, writing him in. You can write in people. It does still count, despite what people tell you. Every vote counts, they say. And I don't believe that if you vote for a person, that vote goes to the main person that's on the ballot, depending on their party. So like if I vote for this person and he was Republican, I don't think that vote will go to Trump. I honestly don't believe that. I'd have to do more research. I could be wrong. Comment below. But I don't believe that is what would happen. I honestly don't believe that. So Biden is currently president. He plans on finishing out his term. But he is stepping down as president. He will not be running for president again. And so, to this date, if you go back and watch all my presidential highlights videos, to this date, the only president that ever served more than 2 terms, and it was during his time in office, which I believe he was our greatest president, you can no longer serve more than 2 years as president. I think it can be overturned. I did do some research on this. I did not write it down, so I would have to go back and research it again. And I might bring that up in my next presidential highlights video, if I remember to write it down in the notes. But I think they can overturn it, but it would have to be approved by Congress and the Senate. I think. And I'm not going to take the time to bring that up or to research that now because my video is already long enough. So, right now, the new presidential election is between Kamala Harris, or Kamala Harris, I don't know how you pronounce her first name, and Donald Trump for what would be his second term. Again, it'll be an interesting race, but FDR was the only president that served more than 2 terms, and he made it a law that you cannot serve more than 2 terms. A lot happened during his time because he was in office for 12 years before he died. And he actually served 4 terms, but his 4th term was cut short by within a few months of being inaugurated. And also during FDR's time in office, kind of a recap a little bit, he was the president that changed the inauguration date from March 20th to January, or March, what was it? Before March. What is this one? It was 1921. Okay, let me see here. Inaugurations, March 4th. It went from March 4th to January 20th for the inauguration, which is technically the first day that the president takes office. So FDR did that. He was responsible for that too as well. But now, as my battery looks like it's about ready to die, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Thank you for joining me for another Presidential Highlights video. Stay tuned for the next one, whenever that might be, and you guys have a sunny day. Bye!